Good morning again, Watershed. My name is Matt. I'm one of the co-pastors here. Thank you for joining us this morning. We've got so much to talk about. There's so many things happening in our world, so many things happening in our city. And oh, that's funny. That is great. Well, how many feet is that? That's 6 feet exactly? All right. I don't need you. I've got my wife, Donna. We don't have to socially distance. Well, we are taking it seriously here. Adam, how you doing this morning? Great. Awesome. Got a full crew here, socially distancing, and we're excited about what we have this morning. Got some guests that I'm really anxious and excited for you guys to meet. David's going to introduce them to you in just a moment. But Austin, I know we're kind of as we continue to do this, like we're trying to find not just the right conversations, not just the right words, but the right creativity to kind of go along with all of it. So we're looking forward to what you have for us this morning.
Welcome to the darkness. The fear will let you in. The root of all exclusion. Who is out and who is in? Systems of belonging that lock us in a cage. We fear those who are different, and we refuse to see their pain. In the heart of everyone, there's a song of love begun. Oh, love, oh, love. In the heart of everyone, there's a song of love begun. Oh, love, oh, love. Divide the healing with anger, fear, and shame. So we damn them with religion and never speak their name. A comfort and delusion. They numb us to the pain. We cannot see our privilege, so we scapegoat and we blame. In the heart of everyone, there's a song of love begun. Oh, love, oh, love, yeah. In the heart of everyone, there's a song of love begun. Oh, love, oh, love. As old as the world is, the struggle is. As long as the struggle is, the world. As old as the world is, the struggle
I know several of you have been emailing or messaging us and saying, hey, what are some ways to get involved during this pandemic season, given what's going on in our world? And at some level, it's like we're running to keep up with opportunities or try to decide, okay, yeah, let's engage this or let's engage that. And I know last weekend, just at the very last moment, we were able to jump in, a few of you, to some virtual activism through Eileen Ariaza, who's one of our block leaders here at Watershed. In the next several weeks, there's actually 2 opportunities if you want to be a part of a march or a protest that I know Watershed is going to be participating in. One is a virtual protest, a virtual type experience that Pam Watson and Tracy Barlow, who are also a couple of block leaders here at Watershed, are making available and inviting people to be a part of. It's actually through the YWCA, and it's something called Stand Against Racism. It's June 26th. I think that's a Friday. If you want more information about that, you can actually email Pam at the email on the screen. And then also, everything that I'm going to talk about for the next 3 or 4 minutes over the next 24 hours will be accessible through the Cabin Fever Church link on our website in the I'm New section. If you scroll down to the bottom, the I'm New section, there's different ways to click on links and find out more information. And of course, we're going to be blasting all of this via social media over the next several weeks. Also, this Friday, the 19th at 1 p.m. in First Ward, if you were with us, I guess a couple of weeks ago when we participated in the It Ends Now March in Uptown, that same group of friends are putting together a freedom march this coming Friday on the 19th in honor of Juneteenth, sort of the acknowledgement, not sort of the acknowledgement of the end of slavery, that anniversary. And so I know some of our staff are going to be at this event. If I had to bet, a lot of you already knew about this and you're going to be jumping in. So those are 2 ways over the next couple of weeks that either virtually or literally you could show up, physically at one of those 2 opportunities. These things are coming at us what feels like about every week. And so, again, sometimes we're able to get ahead of it by a few days, and sometimes we're kind of scrambling to catch up. Also, if you are brand new at Watershed and you're trying to figure out what it means to find some traction here, we're continuing to work towards how to help you do that. And one of those ways is through a monthly kind of interactive experience with Scott and myself called Shed 101. And so if you're kind of kicking the tires going, is this a community that I could really call home? And even if you've already been a part of Shed 101, we would love to spend about an hour and 15 minutes with you, kind of hearing, all right, what has been your story? What is your story? What's your religious past look like? What is pulling you towards this community? And give you the chance to hear a little bit of our story and how we became who we are and kind of where we hope to be headed as a community of faith in the weeks and the months and the years ahead. And so the way that you sign up for that is in the comment section, and that's also available on the Cabin Fever Church link. If you have a senior high student, I know David has been providing different environments on Sunday evening at 7, and I think on Tuesday nights with some Netflix parties. Moving forward, they're still going to be doing the interactive sort of Zoom, either game night or movie watch on Sunday evenings. But the second Sunday of each month, students are going to come together, and it's going to be more of a guided discussion. I know there's a lot going on in the world right now. I have 4 teenager-ish kids in my house, ranging from age 15 to 21. And man, the conversations we're having are robust. And so this is an opportunity for your student to have robust conversations with other students and David and maybe a couple other leaders. And I guess you could sign up for that or make sure that your student is a part of that by emailing david@watershed.charlotte.com. Next weekend is Father's Day. And we're in the process of creating something unique for that Sunday. And part of how you can participate and how we would like you to participate is to send us some photos. You can send these photos to abby@watershedcharlotte.com. But we need photos of fathers with their kids or father figures with their kids. And so if you're a parent, then maybe send us the best photo that you have of you with your kid or your children, if you're a dad, rather. And then if you're a child of a parent, which is all of us, right? What is the photograph that you just love with you with your dad, or you with the person that maybe stood in for your dad because for whatever reason that was just really a tough situation in your life. We want all of them. If you'll send them our way, we have something that we'd like to do with those. We think is going to be really special for next Sunday, Father's Day. By the way, that conversation or that experience is actually, part of that's going to be me and Thomas Garvin, a.k.a. Tommy Allgood, and we're going to talk about what does fatherhood look like these days. And we're going to speak to that from the perspective of a son in his 30s and a dad in his 50s, and try to make some sense of this for our community and for ourselves, really. We're still trying to figure that out for ourselves. But then the Tuesday after, there's no Q&A this Tuesday, and I know David's going to mention that in a moment, but the following Tuesday after that discussion, we're actually putting together a Q&A that is for men only. We have never done this. In the history of Watershed, we've never called men all together. That just feels damning, everything I just said right there. But we're doing this through a Zoom call, and so dads, fathers, sons, like, go ahead and mark your calendar Tuesday night. I think that's the 29th, the 30th maybe. The 30th of, no, that's not right either. I don't remember the date. It's a week from tomorrow, or a week from Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Go ahead and mark your calendar. We're going to start sending out invites for that in the weeks ahead. And then finally, I think that's it. Is that everything? Finally, big thanks to those of you who continue to believe in what's happening here through your resources. The generosity of this community continues to be breathtaking, overwhelming, humbling. And so thank you, those of you who regularly say yes to the work that's happening here. So many of you are not just showing up with your time and your energy, but you're doing that with your resources. And so whether that's weekly, monthly, or just occasionally, all of it is deeply appreciated. If you want to be a part of expressing your participation here, pulling up your seat at the table through generosity, you can do that through the links, through secure links on our website, as well as on our Watershed app. Thanks for being here this morning, and I miss you.
So I've spent the last few weeks just trying to process and wrap my head and heart around what's happening in our world, what's happening with racism. And when Austin sent me this song, my heart just broke into a million pieces. I had to take some time to write down my thoughts, to really try to pin it to words, because it was really hard for me to do. When George Floyd spent his last moments crying for his mama, my heart broke. I can't stand here and pretend that I know what it's like to have black skin, to live with fear and feel that gravity of grief and loss that our black community feels. But I do know what it feels like to be a mom of children with black and brown skin. To know not only once, but twice, my children have been pulled over in our neighborhood, predominantly white neighborhood, and asked, what is your purpose? What are you doing here in this neighborhood? Clearly, it was racial profiling. I also know that in Charlotte, I went to a store and there was a big sign that said, no hoodie sweatshirts are allowed here. And I thought, as a mom, what that would mean if my son with black skin, my precious son who loves to just wear a soft, comfortable hoodie, accidentally walked into the wrong store where he's not welcome. What would that mean for him? To my friends, I want to say, I'm so very sorry. The words are not even adequate for the times that my voice has not been loud enough, that I've not spoken up. And I'm promising you that I will no longer remain silent on these issues. To my children, how I long to protect you and know that sometimes I can't. My heart as a mom is fearful right now. But I promise you, from now on, my votes will only support those who stand with my children, not against them. I will stand with you. I will kneel with you. I will cry with you. I will be angry with you. And I promise that I'm going to do everything in my power to make this a safer place for my child to wear his warm, comfortable hoodie. This song that we're singing today, it's kind of my rallying cry. And I'm just asking you, my community, my friends, to join me in this fight. Just to think of my little boy with dark hair and dark skin. How to tell him that he's not safe on the streets. Where do I begin? To say justice is blind is a short-sighted lie. If color don't matter, why is color first to die? I'm calling for change. To the injustice, stand and fight. I'm calling for change. I'm begging that we will set this right. We won't lose more innocent lives. Just to think of all that's lost when violence steals a life. Oh, humanity, why do we become the ugly side? We say nothing at all. We're endorsing the crime. It's time that we stand up and regard the human life. I'm calling for change. To the injustice, stand and fight. I'm calling for change. We'll protect those innocent lives.
Good morning, Watershed. This is David Roberts. If you're new with us, I'm one of the pastors here on staff at Watershed, and really excited about the conversation that we're going to be having this morning. I've mentioned this a number of times in the past, but I moved to Charlotte
back in September of 2016. And about a week later, Keith Lamont Scott was murdered by CMPD. And that kicked off what has come to be called the Charlotte Uprising. And out of that, there were a great number of obviously protests and things like that, but also dialogue sessions, gatherings at churches and other faith places and things like that, offering education, explanation, the opportunity for lament, for venting, for organizing and strategizing about how things could be different. And obviously, if the events of the last number of weeks, and to be perfectly honest, quite a few events in between 2016 and now have proven that nothing substantially has changed when it comes to the way that black bodies and black persons are policed and treated within a white supremacist world. And so as I was attending and going to a number of these dialogue and learning sessions and things like that, trying my best to sort of drink from the fire hose of learning not just about white supremacy and anti-racism work, which were new ideas to me, but the history of white supremacy and anti-racism in Charlotte in particular. There were two people who just seemed to be at everything that I was attending. Sometimes that they would be part of the speakers or the organizers. Sometimes they were just there in support of the organizers of the event. But over the last couple of years, I've gotten to know them a little bit. Greg Jarrell in particular, and then I've had the privilege the last couple times that I've done something with Greg, getting to know his wife, Helms, Jarrell, a little bit as well. And so that's who we're going to be talking to this morning, Greg and Helms Jarrell. I'm going to actually allow them to introduce themselves when they get up here, but if you can push all those like buttons as they're coming up to the stage here. I just assume that it's just a whole bunch of hearts right now. I can't see it. It doesn't show that on our screen, but that's what I think is probably happening. So thank you both for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. We're so glad to be with the Watershed family this morning.
Yeah, so in your words, and who are Helms and Greg Jarrell to Helms and Greg Jarrell?
Well, we wear a lot of different hats. We're primarily the co-directors of QC Family Tree, which is an organization that practices cultural organizing to cultivate community for the common good. And we can talk about what that all means later. But we are also ordained pastors, parents, gardeners, and neighboring people.
Yeah, and so we moved to Charlotte. We've been here for about 15 years now. Moved as part of what we would then have called a new monastic community that we were starting over in the West Charlotte neighborhood of Enderley Park. And so we've been there doing that work of hospitality, resistance, but also trying to build a small village there that really highlights and emphasizes the strengths and the gifts, the abundance that's already present within that neighborhood. But as white people in a black neighborhood, it's also necessary, it's our responsibility to work with our white supporters, our family, the other circles of influence that we have to help build some understanding of what racism is, what whiteness is, and the ways that we begin to break down those systems so that we're not continuing in the same patterns with the same violent patterns and raising our children in the same violent beliefs. Sure.
Now, I know the two of you, we'll talk about this in a little bit, are doing some work around kind of dismantling whiteness and reading groups and things like that. And in a few minutes, I want to give you the opportunity to give us some details on that. But before we do, one thing I mentioned a moment ago that I've really appreciated about events that you two have either hosted or organized or been a part of is the opportunity to contextualize and learn about this place, about Charlotte, about the history of white supremacy, of policing, of the school system, everything. And so kind of before we get into what's going on right now and the work that you're doing and the work that we could be doing and things like that, could you tell us a little bit about how we got here? And I'm sure we could probably spend the next 45 minutes or more talking about that. But what would be, if someone is new to Charlotte, or maybe just for the first time waking up to the reality of what Charlotte is and is experiencing right now as part of this broader national conversation, what would be the highlight things, whether a historical moment or some sort of institution or structure, policy system or something like that, that is embedded here that would be worth highlighting to kind of get a better idea of how we got to where we are now?
So I think it's important for us to understand the context of where we are, right? And history is part of the context. Sometimes when you say the word history, people's eyes glaze over, right? But history is really just stories.
Sure.
It's the stories of who we are and how we got to where we are. So there are lots of stories that are hidden within Charlotte's history. And one of the ways that I've come to talk about this is that the state motto of North Carolina says "esse quam videri," which in Latin means to see, or to be rather than to seem. And so my sort of shorthand for the DNA of Charlotte is that we just flip that backwards, so that our city is built around to seem rather than to be. And you see that throughout the history of Charlotte, which is not different than the history of the United States. So our main intersection at the square is the intersection of two ancient native trading paths, right? So Tryon Street, part of an ancient trading path of Native Americans that ran north and south. Trade Street, one that ran kind of east and west. But that history is kind of hidden, right? It's papered over. The way that our neighborhoods came to be how they are now, segregated primarily, there's specific history to that. There are specific stories and names and policies that have influenced the way all of that works. And so one of the more recent ways of examining that is through the story of urban renewal, where downtown was divided up into 4 wards. We still use that language of 4 wards now. And those 4 wards, of those 4 wards, Second Ward was the most prominent black neighborhood probably in the state of North Carolina, certainly within this city. And that neighborhood, 238 acres, were just wiped off the map to the point that there are only 2 or 3 buildings still standing from that era. And that was a part of federally funded programs that affected black neighborhoods all across the country. So you don't have to look. This began in Charlotte in 1960. So you don't really have to look that far back. There are a lot of people who are still alive who remember growing up in Brooklyn or Second Ward. And so you don't have to look that far back to understand that the things that we're seeing now on the news, the things that we see people in the streets over, are connected to a long history of racism, as our friend Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler, who's one of the brilliant theologians, public theologians of our city, says that racism is a system of removing people from land and land from people. And that's part of the story of the city of Charlotte. That's part of the story of our neighborhood in Ridley Park, where gentrification is beginning to really take off now. So knowing that context gives us an ability to understand how we got here, and also like how to begin to get in the stream of the movement to help stop this.
Sure. You said something there. You said something there, quoting Reverend Dr. Sadler, who talking about people from land and land from people, which frames racism and white supremacy differently than I think a lot of white people often approach it or experience it. So often it's a individualistic kind of heart change sort of thing, where if we can just get everyone to kind of soften and change their hearts, then somehow magically this will go away. And there's sort of an erasure, or maybe more nicely, in ignorance at the very least, to kind of the material realities, the systemic, the structural, the financial and monetary realities that are inextricably bound with the white supremacist reality, that makes up not just our country but this city in particular. And so, let's just dive right into that, because I've heard both of you speak, powerfully, intelligently, just movingly on that particular topic, which can often be very, very disruptive. So heads up, very, very disruptive for, I keep looking at the screen, but you guys are actually up there on that camera. Very, very disruptive for people deemed white to experience kind of the material side of racism. So.
Okay, I'm going to make my best attempt. There, you can look it up, Google it. White supremacy culture and an iceberg, right? So the tip of the iceberg is our individualistic behaviors and ideals or values that we've been taught that kind of come out in our actions. So if I believe that individualism and individual agency, that is a symptom of white supremacy culture, and if I believe that that's really true, then I make decisions for myself and perhaps maybe my family, and then, but it doesn't really trickle down to the government or systems, or when I start to, if I kind of become converted from that way, and I start to think about the common good, and I start to speak about the common good, people who still believe in individualism and individual agency might start to point at me and be like, you're being too political. Mm-hmm. So the iceberg thing is like the things that are super one-on-one, personal, my bias, my prejudice, and how that might kind of how I might take that out in individual one-on-one or in small group world or at work or something like that. But then if you get down further, the values become sort of like morals that you place on all of your environment. And then if you dig down even further than that, all of those morals start to like take on like bones and structure and government and economy and that kind of thing. So at the tip of the iceberg, if I believe in like personal property, then way down here at the way bottom, then the government can control who owns property, how property is valued, and that is all white supremacy culture. If we were to be immersed in another culture, personal property is not a thing that everyone in the whole entire world believes is true. But we have been taught that property ownership, that like we discover land and then all of a sudden we can somehow exchange something and it becomes ours. And then that trickles all the way down to economy, government, policy, how neighborhoods are designed. And that's where we get redlining and urban renewal and those kinds of things. And so what happens is that sometimes we Western people who have been indoctrinated in white supremacy culture, we're like, woohoo, we see the tip of the iceberg. We see that we have some issues around individualism. We see that we have some issues around our bias, but we stay there and we don't get way down. And so how we have, it's not just about like, oops, I thought this thing and it was wrong. It was, this thing has seeped into every single part of who we are as human beings, of our organizations, of our, like all the things. So that's my super overlook, but Greg can give like super details.
The iceberg is a perfect example. You see the tip of it, right? But the vast majority of it stays under hidden, right, underwater.
And why? Because it's hard. Like it stays hidden because it makes it really like there's a lot of sacrifice and risk and threat, and we start to feel like fragile, and we start to feel broken, and we start to have feelings, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, that's too much, and that's why we stay at the top. Okay, sorry.
Yes, so there are the feelings that go with that, and then there's also the context. So Helms mentions personal property, and this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people who are listening because they've never thought that the story of families owning title to land as individual property holders is a relatively recent invention in human history. It has a story to it that goes back about 600 or 700 years, which is not all that long in the course of human history, right? And so if you begin to understand that context, then you at least know what you're battling against. And you can begin to see how there are structures under the surface that have undergirded all of the oppression that we see.
As both of you were talking there, I'm reminded one of the books that our staff has been studying, over the last, pretty much in this calendar year, has been How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram Kendi. And in his prior book, Stamped from the Beginning, he kind of gets into the history. It's the definitive history of white supremacy, essentially. And he gets into this idea that so often we get the order of operations wrong. We think that we're starting with that tip of the iceberg, the individualism, and the individual personal bigotry or prejudice, and that we start there, and because of that, it bleeds into, those lower, harder layers that are often below the surface, the systems, the structures, the policies, the financial disparities, and so on. But Kenny's point is, no, it often starts at the structural level, and it creates a narrative that ends up with that little tip sticking out that we can finally notice. And so Kenny's point is that in order to combat this, it's not simply just change everyone's heart. Because one thing that evangelicals and Christians like to say, no, it's not a skin issue, it's a sin issue. And if we can just, and it's like, well, okay, I'll grant you it's a sin issue as long as we're understanding sin at a more material or systemic level. So if we're getting into like solution mode, because hopefully those listening would like to end white supremacy on some, and racism. So let's talk about some solutions that maybe don't get airtime as often, in church context, because I feel like the church by and large wants to focus on that individual, that kind of bootstrapping meritocracy piece, and we don't like to talk about systems in the church, or at least in the modern kind of Western evangelical church. So let's talk about some other solutions.
Well, okay, yes, and
Yeah.
I want us to think about, we have to be really careful that we don't go straight to like linear measuring goals. That the work that we have to do is long game work, and it also is emerging. Like the world in which the peaceable kingdom of God is unveiled is somewhat known to us, but it's a mysterious, glorious, abundant thing that we have no idea what it looks like. And so I think that's really important, that like we're not going to get it right. And we're not going to get it right in this generation. But we are going to be getting it right all along. It's like both and. It's a practice and a process that is unveiling and emerging over time. And so we have to be really careful that we don't like name a solution, work at the solution, chip it away, get at it, and be like, yeah, we're done. Because I think that's a temptation of us to be like, if we could just figure out the formula, and if we could just like knock off those bullet points, then we'll get there. So anyway, I just want to mention before people like start to super want solutions that it's not that easy.
Because that's whiteness, right? That whiteness is like, okay, we've identified the problem. Now let's create the formulas. We'll create a list, a task force, and boom, solved it. Move on, get back to normal.
Yes.
It's the way that whiteness tries to preserve the status quo.
Right. So part of the solution is like fail a lot. I mean, make concerted attempts and then fail and learn from the failure and get used to failing. And so I think, anyway, so I just want to mention that because that's a temptation of mine, that even in like protest spaces, I want to like get it right as a protester. In organizing spaces, I want to get it right as an organizer, but I'm still like unlearning a lot of things and not ever getting it right. So,
Sure.
But there are some things that we can make attempts at.
Yeah, and so you think about this as you're working on a house that has foundation issues, right? And if you're working on a house that has foundation issues and you go and replace the windows and you put some new shingles on it, you will not have really done yourself any favors. You will have just prolonged the problems by not understanding what lies at the root of the system, how things are put together. And so to know better, or to do better, we've got to know better. So part of what we have to do is begin examining, in really painful ways sometimes, the institutions that have formed us into the individuals and the families that we are. So how have white families operated in ways that have demanded silence, that have demanded complicity? And I mean, imagine the pain of beginning to have to unravel that around the Thanksgiving dinner table. So we have to think about that with our families. And how have we perpetuated that with our own children? And how do we begin to unravel some of those lies that we've told, sometimes without even knowing that they were lies? How have our churches packaged theology, packaged whiteness within our theology, within our mission? And so to begin to unpack the inner workings of our institutions, the foundations that we've built upon, so that we can actually, if you go and fix the foundation of your house, then, or sometimes you may just have to tear the whole thing down, right? You say, this is not worth it anymore. We've got to tear this all down and start from scratch. That might be where we are, but at least to have a working knowledge of what we're up against so that we can begin to see what are the small actions, the imaginative creations that we can take.
So, okay, so there, maybe we could take one little thing, like personal property, and think about what are some solutions around that one. Would that help? Okay, so one of the things that we made some attempts to think about is how can property be cooperatively owned? And so instead of one individual gaining investment off of a piece of property and then the bank and all that, then we can think about, okay, is there a way for a land to be collectively owned? What does that look like? And so our practice of that was to think about a community land trust. The community land trust is a membership organization, and the land becomes cooperatively owned and cooperatively governed. And the people who live on that land are the ones who get to have the governing decisions about how the land is used. Is it perfect solution? Not exactly. It still doesn't check all the boxes of liberation, but it's an attempt at an alternative to personal property ownership. And so one of the things I'm thinking about that I'll just really quickly breeze through is that there are different ways at getting at transformation. And so in my mind, the land trust is something like recreate the possibility or reimagine what it's like and try it. So those are two, recreate and reimagine. Another one is resist. That's what we're seeing on the streets right now with people protesting. And then another one is reform. So take what already exists and try to work within it. And try to see if we can figure out a liberating way with the patterns we already have in place. I think you mentioned that y'all talked about police abolition last week. So police abolition is not reform. It is not taking what exists and trying to make it work. It is totally demolishing the thing, which is resistance, and then recreating something new. So that's been helpful to me to think about where do I sit in solution building, in the practice of anti-racism. Am I a reformer? Am I a resistor? Am I a recreationist? Co-creator, or am I a reimaginer? And I can be all of those things. But anyway, I think that's helpful to think about. So, Greg, in the personal property thing, can you think of other solutions? Because that was what we were aiming for.
So the idea of cooperative ownership of businesses, for instance. All of this, so there's so many possibilities out there that don't just resort to privatized wealth building. And so that really, it calls on us to build some new muscles. It's hard to talk about these things because we've not explored the possibilities, right? Capitalism has so stolen our imaginations that we can only think about one way of getting at this, to building businesses and building wealth as privatized family enterprises. But to really be anti-racist, we've also got to work in, as Dr. Kendi talks about in that book, we've got to work in anti-capitalist modes as well, because what we have is racialized capitalism, and you can't extract those two things from one another. So we've got to reimagine some ways that we work with one another. Another thing that we've talked about and that we wanted to talk a little bit about this morning is just thinking in terms of reparations as well. And this really strikes against the notion of individual personal property, since we're talking about that. So the immediate argument against reparations is always, well, I never owned any slaves.
Right. That was a long time ago.
Right. That was a long time ago. But to really fully understand the systems that were built upon is to know that we live in an economy that was built by stolen labor. And there's still evidence of that all around. There's still institutions that continue to operate in that fashion. And so if we live in that economy built on stolen labor, then we bear some responsibility, all of us, across all races, but particularly as white people, for saying we did some damage that we've never repaired, and immense damage that we've never repaired. And so we are responsible collectively, having built our economy upon that, for repairing that damage. And that's the basic argument, which makes all kinds of moral sense.
And biblical sense.
And biblical sense.
Yeah. like there's huge sections of the Bible that talk about systemic reparation as a means of repentance and reconciliation that we like to conveniently gloss over, or to be fair, probably didn't learn about, because churches don't talk about those things.
Well, and oftentimes when we're reading the Bible, for example, the story of the Exodus, we think of ourselves as Israelites.
Right.
And maybe we need to start, here's a practice, here's a solution. Everybody read all the stories and think of yourself as the oppressor, as Pharaoh. Or maybe we read all the stories and every time it says I, we just put y'all in there, or we put a something that includes us in the situation. Because I think sometimes we've gotten so individualistic about things that we take it as an individual kind of notion rather than a we notion. And then we also don't understand ourselves as being the ones who are marginalizing, who are oppressing. When we read the scripture text, and we can do both and at the same time, because we want to pray for deliverance and liberation, and we want God to deliver us. But at the same time, we could read the text and recognize that perhaps we're not playing the character we thought we were all along.
The verse that was this was back, when Ferguson and then Eric Garner and then Baltimore, like that, just like sequence of events, historically a number of years ago. The verse that was like transformative for me, what came out of the Exodus narrative, and it's the verse when the people of Israel are finally leaving Egypt and they plunder the Egyptians, and then there's this throwaway verse in there that says that this mixed multitude went out with them, and reading from like Old Testament scholars that like these were probably like Egyptians who were like, wait a second, like I've been on this side, and maybe they weren't part of the actual like slave drivers or anything like that, but like I've been complicit, and God's over there with with them, with the other, with the marginalized, and they just drop everything and they go out with them. Yep.
So the destruction of whiteness is good news for white people.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, just like the destruction of patriarchy is good news for men.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's so that's really crucial to understand. And so what Helms is suggesting is a fairly radical way for white people to read the Bible. Like, let's read the story of the exile, recognizing that we're the Babylonians,
right.
We're Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Yeah.
That's not a common thing for us to do. And so it gives some fresh perspective. But also, we can think at the same time about what whiteness has cost us. Mm-hmm. And about what it would take for us to stop being white.
Right.
What it would take would be a societal transformation. So it would never be an individual thing, right? I'll be white so long as there is such a thing as whiteness.
Right.
But also, what might it take to break that so that we can be freed from it as well?
And so the two of you and some other friends around Charlotte, you're starting to do that work, organizationally. Like there's some reading groups and some stuff about this notion of dismantling whiteness and what it might look like to no longer be white. So with the time we have left, let's kind of spend some time there. What might this look like? You can either kind of plug what you all will be doing and kind of offering in the coming weeks, or kind of more conceptually, kind of building off of what you just said there. What might it look like what might that process, that messy, kind of imperfect, non-formulaic process of dismantling whiteness look like for people?
So since it's church, and I want to make sure everybody feels like they've been to church this morning, here's conceptually, in the book of Nehemiah, there's this really crucial story that I think is deeply important. So, and this is the quick version, but in the book of Nehemiah, the people of Israel have, Jerusalem has been ransacked by the Babylonians. The leadership of Jerusalem has been taken into exile. They've been gone for 70 years. Nehemiah is the city planner, the architect, who is given the responsibility, the community organizer is probably the best way to describe him, who's given the responsibility of rebuilding Jerusalem because the Babylonians, they come in this fire and fury, and they get put out by the Persians pretty quickly. Right? So the Persians release Israel, and they go back to Jerusalem, and they begin to rebuild. And everybody works on rebuilding, right, until this kind of economic strata begins to form. And so you can find the story in Nehemiah chapter 4. And then what happens at the beginning of Nehemiah 5 is you've gotten enough economic stratification that some people decide they don't want to work anymore. They'd rather be bankers. And so they say, this is hard work, and you need money to buy lunch while you're working. We'll lend you the money. You just have to give us your vineyard as collateral. And when the debts stop getting paid, because people are working really hard on building the walls of Jerusalem, on building the common good, they say, well, we've got your vineyard already, and we know that you still need to eat, so we'll take your children as collateral. And all this sounds very much like the system of racism, though race was not invented in biblical times. It wasn't invented until much later. And so what eventually happens is that Nehemiah, the leader of the people, becomes involved in this system. And finally, the people who've been oppressed by the system, they get in the streets and they cry out, right? We've built this place for you now. You stopped participating in the common good. You started working on your own advantage alone. And it's time for you to repent. What Nehemiah does in his wisdom is recognize the truth of what those people are telling him. And then they begin to break the system. They call on folks to repent and to repair the damage. And this is Nehemiah 4 and 5. I would encourage you to go and read it out there. And so Nehemiah calls on his people to repent and to repair the damage. And so you've got to begin to build an understanding of what a system like that looks like, how it works within us, and how we begin to break it down, how we begin to develop within ourselves the capacity to actually repent and to begin doing the repair that we need to.
Do we have time for a really super specific?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we live in Enderley Park, west side of town, has been black for a long time, but not always, but whatever. Anyway, y'all can look up the history. Okay, so 70% of the folks in our neighborhood rent housing. That means only 30% of the neighborhood is homeowner owned, lived in. Why is that? Redlining and urban renewal, literally in our deed, like in our current document, it says that black people cannot own our house or live in it long term. I mean, that is written into the documents, right? And probably many of us across Charlotte have a similar situation. Well, what does that mean? Okay, well, I went to college. How did I go to college? Well, somebody and my parents had accumulated some kind of wealth enough for me to go to college. Maybe they got a loan. Maybe they just had the wealth. How did they have the wealth? Because they own property. And the property, my grandparents own more than one property, and therefore they accumulated wealth. Inheritance goes down. Well, if you have been kept from the government for owning property for generations after generations, and then you're still renting and transitional and those kinds of things, who carries the burden of having to fix that? The people who own the property, right? And so our job is to look at it and say, like, I didn't make this thing. I didn't write the deed. This is a 1928 house. I didn't write the deed. I didn't feel some kind of way and keep people out, but I'm still benefiting from the fact that I got to go to college, that I went to grad school, that my parents are doing fine, that all those things. And so when we start to recognize that all of that is built on a system, and not just because how I feel about somebody else, or whether or not I have a prejudice against someone else, then once you know better, you do better. And then you have to think through, okay, what are the things that can repair this big, humongous thing? And and then my last little thing is, in Isaiah 58, there's this long list of all these things that God is asking us to do. Like, what is the fast that you choose? And there's a very long list, and it goes through the whole list. And some things are interpersonal, and some things are systemic, and some things are social, and some things are heart-centered, and some things are mind-centered, and some things require labor and the body. All of those things are required of us. And then after we're doing all of those things and repeating doing all of those things and then doing them again and then all y'all doing all those things, then we're called repairers of the breach. Then we're practicing reparation. And so reparation, as Greg was saying, is not like I have to like Venmo somebody for their emotional labor. And thank you, Sonia Renee Taylor, for helping me to understand this. That it's not, I mean, that is just a thank you for helping me to understand something. But I can't repay someone for this debt. Instead, I have to work within an organizing economy, group of people, lifelong struggle to try to collectively and systemically repair the damage that has been done.
So one very practical step is that we, along with Ben Boswell, who is the pastor at Myers Park Baptist Church, are beginning to ask people to work with us in examining whiteness. So in white families, in white institutions, we rarely, if ever, talk about whiteness. And in order to break it down, in order to, as James Baldwin says, not be trapped in a history that we cannot understand, we've got to look at it. We've got to work at it in order to dismantle it. And so we're asking people to join us in some small groups that will do some reading, that will engage with some art and cultural pieces that are black authors, black artists, helping us to look at whiteness, helping us to understand whiteness, so that given a better understanding, we can begin to break it down in our families, in our institutions, in our churches, in our city.
Awesome. Well, that's a great place to end because obviously we could keep talking. There's so much more, of this to dismantle, to name, to unpack, to unmask. But if people wanted to, you guys are local. You're here. You've been here, and this, some of these conversations about whiteness might be a great way for people to join the conversation. Keep up with your work and so on. So for those out there who want to follow along, connect, to join the work that you're doing, well, what are some of the ways that they can do that?
QCFamilyTree.org. Our Facebook and social media stuff stays fairly active with what's happening. We do want to highlight that Hannah Hassan, who is part of our staff, but also works on a number of initiatives around town, is doing a storytelling event tonight that will be live streamed. Okay. It's called Weapons of Whiteness, I think is the name of it. And so it's a storytelling event where she's gathered stories from white people about whiteness. And I'm sure it's going to be a really powerful event. Additionally, you can contact us through qcfamilytree.org, or David can help you get in touch with us about these groups that we're beginning with Myers Park Baptist. And Helms has some amazing art out in the world that you can see on her website. I've got a book out in the world that delves into these issues as well. So helmsjarrell.com, gregjarrell.com as well.
Awesome. And for those of you who are familiar with our Block resource page, Block Leaders, Greg's book is one of the recommended resources there, so you can get the information on it there. So, well, Helms, Greg, thank you so much. This has been, it's been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for all of them. But I really appreciate both of you, the work that you're doing, and the way that you have been kind of a gift to me and my own kind of journey in education. In fact, the very first time I ever heard you speak, you kind of exegeted that Nehemiah story, and it blew my mind. And I was like, all right, I'm in the right place, So thank you for that. Thank you for the gift that you've been to our community this morning.
Thanks. Thanks to the Watershed community.
All right, we'll do the like thing again. And Watershed, it's been wonderful to hang out with you as best we can in these times right now. Again, this morning, like Greg said, if you have questions or want to connect with the Jarrells and the work that they're doing around dismantling whiteness, David at watershedcharlotte.com is my email. I'd be happy to help facilitate that connection for you. As a reminder, there's the event that they mentioned tonight, Hannah and Hassan's event, and then Juneteenth on Friday. There's the demonstration happening that our community is going to be a part of as well. So lots to do this week. Thank you for staying connected, and hopefully we'll see you soon.